Hello, our dear investors. My name is Valters. I'm a co-founder at Mintos and operating also as a chief operating and financial officer here. Today we are going to have an Ask Mintos Anything session about war in Ukraine and sanctions implied on Russia and how that is impacting our investors, their investments, and us as Mintos. So during this session, which will be roughly like 30 to 40 minutes long, we will start with overall description, what is happening, what kind of sanctions has been imposed, what is happening in terms of payments, and so on. And we have also seen your questions in Slido, so very big thanks for putting those and voting there. And we will also kind of touch upon those questions. So please bear in mind that today's session will be very specific about things that is being influenced by the war in Ukraine and the resulting sanctions on Russia. So we will not be covering other topics for funds in recovery, which was also mentioned in the Slido questions. But there is an upcoming Ask Mintos Anything session in April, which will be dedicated to funds in recovery, just as it was the previous quarters. So we hope for your understanding, because we want to have kind of a focus here. So the agenda would be, first I will tell more about what is happening overall in the financial markets, especially related to Ukraine and Russia, and what is the impact, and then go to your questions. So what has happened? So on 21st of February, basically 2 weeks ago, Russia has launched a full-scale invasion in Ukraine. Currently, there is still kind of a very bloody war ongoing in Ukraine, and as a result, it also kind of brings a lot of uncertainties. There have been unprecedented sanctions imposed on Russia, and these are also emerging on daily basis. So we have kind of presented what we know as best as of today, but also during today, when we kind of updated the presentations, there are kind of new things coming on. So therefore, all the investors should also kind of be following what is happening. And well, basically both kind of war is definitely kind of not a business as usual situation for Ukraine, as well as sanctions of the size that have been kind of implemented are not business as usual operations, and they are impacting how both those countries and how other financial markets can deal with those countries. And overall, then the kind of, if we see on the kind of direct impacts, then obviously the lending companies in Ukraine and their borrowers where our investors have invested has been impacted by war, while all the investments that are done in Russia is being impacted by sanction and kind of responses by the Russian central bank and the government. In terms of our communication, so we are updating on a daily basis or every 2 days on the kind of newest events. And as I mentioned, so the things are really kind of changing, if not by hours, then often by days, in terms of sanctions and adjustments in the kind of what can be done, what monies could be transferred, and what cannot. So please kind of keep a follow up on our blog post. So you can see all the information there. I won't go through kind of each and every thing that has happened over the last week. So all of that is available on Mintos webpage and our blog post. And as I said, we are updating that basically every day with the newest developments. So let's go forward. So what was Mintos exposure as of 24th of February? That is the day when the Russian invasion in Ukraine started. In Ukraine, our investors have a very tiny exposure. So out of all the outstanding investments, just below 0.4% was invested. And there are also two lending companies for which the investments are currently in stage of funds in recovery, meaning there are Finco Ukraine and Alex Credit Ukraine. So these are companies that defaulted already before the war started. Actually, it was back in 2020. And those funds are still in recovery. For Russia, the outstanding investments overall on platform are slightly bigger. So as at that date, it made up 15%. And I'll touch upon kind of what's happening in both of the countries. What's important to mention also is that it means that the remaining 85%, which is kind of large majority of our investments, so they are done in countries outside of those two, outside of Ukraine and Russia, and those kind of loan performance and all the operations are going without interruptions. So let's first tackle with Ukraine and the lending companies and exposures what our investors have there. So currently we have just like one active lending company that is operating in Ukraine, which is SOS Credit. Obviously, now when the war has started, then the martial law has been imposed in state of Ukraine. No payments are being collected, as well as central bank has issued regulation which allows those loans to be prolonged, which is obviously kind of very understandable situation in case the war has broken out. When it comes to the defaulted lending companies, so the ones that were already in recoveries, so Finco, which actually makes the largest part of those 12 million exposure, we actually do expect very minor or none impact on the remaining recoveries. And the reason there is because as part of our recovery efforts and restructuring efforts, we had managed to secure guarantees for payments from this remaining amount, which doesn't come from Ukraine. So at this moment, largely the recoveries which could have been kind of recovered from the borrowers to which the loans were issued was done. There obviously was something still left, but not a majority part, and the rest would be from cash flows from other countries. So at this moment, there is kind of no impact on that. What relates to Alex Credit, which is the other defaulted lending company. So at the moment, it is unknown what would be the effect, but of course, given the war situation, it would be a negative effect on expected recoveries. And again, as a reminder, so Ukraine, it was in terms of exposure, just like 0.4% of outstanding investments. So for Russia, which is bigger exposure, before I would go into what's kind of really happening in terms of sanctions, by taking a step back, I want to kind of just like show like what's happening overall in the market and what are the consequences for kind of any financial market transactions. And this is kind of valuable to understand, to also kind of put into perspective what is happening to investments done through Mintos. So basically, since 21st of February, a lot of things has happened. And when we look at financial markets, so such indexes as MSCI and FTSE Russell, which is basically investing in across the world, they are removing Russian stocks from those indices, which is not kind of a very regular thing that is done. Basically, when you kind of invest across the world, and you kind of keep doing that. So this shows that these are kind of unprecedented situation what's happening in Russia. The same has been happening in London Stock Exchange, where some of the stocks of Russian companies that were listed in the stock exchange. The trading was halted. There has been some of the neo banks or challenger banks, fintech banks, whatever you call them. They have also stopped transfers in and out from Russia, or also stopped currency exchanges. There are kind of many of the airline companies are actually leasing the aircraft, and currently Russia therefore kind of stopped all the foreign flights so that those aircraft couldn't be sized, and so on. And apart from that, kind of many of also kind of non-financial market companies have announced or have already left Russian market. So this is like what is current consequence, and why it is so. So even though the war activities are taking place in Ukraine, even that Russia has invaded Ukraine, there have been very targeted sanctions done by European Union, America, and a lot of other countries around the world. And those sanctions are implemented by those kind of various stakeholders, and they are in like few main areas. I know this might be kind of a bit technical, but please bear with me because it is important to kind of show like what is kind of later on kind of overall also kind of impact for Mintos investors. So so sanctions first of all are on certain individuals, and the aim for that is that those companies with who are owned by those individuals cannot do business or cannot do kind of any transfers. So that's one. There are sanctions on banks. It's not kind of or for all Russian banks, but for majority or largest Russian banks, and they are also different in size and type. So some are just for limiting those banks' ability to raise additional funds, and some are limiting them from kind of any transactions with Europe or Western countries. Another sanction or limitation is on SWIFT ban. So what SWIFT ban means that SWIFT is a system which is used for banks to make international transfers and do kind of messaging among those banks. So also currently some of the banks are being in Russia are being blocked from this system, which further kind of makes it difficult to do any transfers. And finally, there are also kind of freezing of assets of both kind of individuals, but as well as Central Bank of Russia. And why it's important to mention that, so Central Bank of Russia actually has kind of very big foreign reserves. It is kind of fourth largest in the world, and that would help to manage the FX rate, meaning how much ruble is worth against dollar or euro. But given that majority of those assets of central bank are frozen, it means that FX rate cannot also be kind of managed as it was previously. So these are sanctions which were kind of provided from other countries toward Russia. So Russia has also made response to those sanctions, which is also kind of impacting what kind of financial deals can be made. And please remember that those things are kind of very fluid, meaning that they are kind of changing day to day. And just before this Ask Me This Anything session, we also kind of got to know that there are kind of new activities as kind of response to the sanctions implemented. But what are the kind of key things? So one thing is that Russian stock market has been closed since 26th of February, even though it doesn't have kind of any direct impact on Mintos. It means that the stock prices actually were kind of frozen as it was just before the invasion, when the market was still open, and that also impacts the equity of Russian banks, meaning that it's not decreased, and the Russian banks can kind of stay afloat at least now. There have been certain limitations on any currency deals, meaning that by currency deals here it's meant what local Russian entities, be it a lending company with whom we cooperate or any other business in Russia, what they can do. So one of the limitations what was implemented is that all the incoming currencies what any business is receiving, they should kind of forward 80% of that to the Russian central bank. There was introduced a 30% fee for currency exchange. So there is no mistake. It's not like 3%, but it's 30. So it's very sizable. Today we got to know that it was reduced to 12%, but still it's kind of very sizable. And also there are kind of limitations, or basically currently it's forbidden to send currencies abroad. So all of those things are done basically because the central bank's assets have been frozen to somehow manage the foreign exchange rate. And just like late last Friday, there have been credit holidays implemented for borrowers for loans issued before 1st of March. So it means that under certain conditions, the borrowers can go to their lenders, which would be also kind of lending companies with whom we cooperate, and ask for credit holidays for prolonging the repayment schedules or asking to not calculate interest. So what has been then the kind of overall impact from all those kind of sanctions from European Union and United States and other countries, as well as the response from Russian central bank and the government? And this overall impact is what I will be describing here, is not only what impacts Mintos, but basically everyone who is dealing with Russian entities. So since 21st of February, ruble has depreciated quite considerably. So as of today, it's roughly 40%. And what's important to note, there is also kind of a very large bid-ask spread. So what is bid-ask spread? Meaning is that, let's say, if currently you would go to Google and just like Google euro ruble exchange rate, and it would say that like for €1 you can get 140 rubles. Actually, the actual price at which you could buy rubles or sell rubles would be different. So you could, by selling, you would get less, and to buy you would need to kind of pay more. And sometimes this kind of bid-ask spread for some of the market players still are offering this transaction is up to like 30 or 40%. So it means instead of like 140, it could easily be like 170 for buying and 110 for selling. And it is possible that there will be kind of further changes, either due to kind of new sanctions or response from the central bank. The other kind of big impact, which is kind of impacting everybody, is interbank transfers. So Russian banks are able to transfer rubles, but there are very limited or no banks, basically limited number of banks outside of Russia who are willing to accept those rubles. And let me explain shortly why that's happening. So the banking system works that well, it's very little of kind of physical cash. So when the bank transfers money to like other bank, it's never or very rarely that like actual suitcases of cash is kind of exchanging hands. So the kind of one bank which is receiving the money is a kind of account it, or it's actually kind of transferred to just like from accounting perspective to, let's say, Russian banks in internal system. But given those sanctions and given that European countries have frozen assets of Russian banks and Russian central banks, there is a higher risk that similar activities might be done also by Russian central bank or Russian banks. So therefore, there are small amount or like very limited number of banks who are able and willing to kind of keep that money in Russian banks, because at some moment it just might be kind of not accessible. So therefore, what we also have seen is that also our partner banks, they are saying that they are not able to kind of hold that currency anymore. On the other side, so European banks, they are able to accept payments in euros or in other currencies, subject that they would be kind of compliant to sanctions, meaning that it doesn't kind of come from either sanctioned person or from a sanctioned bank. However, those Russian banks are not able to transfer those euros due to kind of limitations. And it's either because there's kind of limitation to transfer currency abroad, or kind of a European bank would not be able to kind of accept money from, even if they would be able to, kind of Russian bank willing to transfer that, they would not be able to accept it because it's a sanctioned bank. And what's important to know, so even if those transactions goes through, so what we have seen that there might be additional commission or for foreign exchange in between, or just like commission for doing that transfer for up to 20 to 30%, which previously would be basically pennies on whole the amount. And yeah, so the result is that there is kind of less options to hold money outside of Russia in rubles, while holding money in Russian banks by European entities just kind of currently seen too risky. What does it mean for Mintos investors and Mintos itself? So we had stopped issuing or kind of listing any new loans from Russia as of 21st of February. A day before that, before the kind of actual invasion, we also stopped it for one of the strategies. But since then, we have stopped kind of listing of new loans. However, we believe that investors who would like to kind of exit and the ones who would like to buy already existing loans should have that possibility, and therefore we have left secondary market as open. So what are the effect of like all of the things I previously talked about? So starting with sanctions. So our approach regarding borrowers and lending companies in Russia historically has been already quite conservative in that perspective, that the sanction risk has always been there because it was a higher jurisdiction risk, and therefore we didn't work with lending companies, even though we kind of reviewed them, did the due diligence, but we refused to kind of work with quite a few lending companies whose either they were lending to projects which could be to majority of legal persons or state-related projects. So there's kind of a separate sector which of lending companies who's dealing with that. So we said no to them. And as well, we were kind of very thoroughly reviewing who are the ultimate beneficial owners of the lending companies, so that like we would not kind of run into potential sanction risk. So at this moment, kind of none of the lending companies that we are working with have been sanctioned so far. And sanctions, of course, are also kind of impacting with the banks, because the lending companies still, they have number of banks with whom they are working, and some of those banks have been already sanctioned, which also kind of impacts the payments. So if we go further, so for the payments until the end of or beginning of the last week, last week, when discussing with lending companies in Russia, we have got information that the borrower payments or collections were not impacted. They had kind of reduced or were reviewing the issuance volumes. However, not all of the payments that were due to Mintos, which would then be distributed to investors, went through. There are few payments. So last week there were like 3 payments in Russian rubles that was delivered to Mintos banks, and this money was distributed to investors. And as mentioned, so because of the new law passed in Russia, so although up till now the borrower payments collected by lending companies were going according to the plan, there might be some impact through likely prolongations because of those credit holidays. And for Mintos and investors, kind of third impact is on currency exchange. So out of all of the exposures, those 15% of total investments on Mintos, roughly 1/7 of exposure was in Russian rubles. So it means that there is kind of no direct impact for the lending companies, while 6/7 or majority was in euros. So it means that lending companies would be facing losses when the Russian ruble depreciates. What is a good thing is that largest part of that 6/7 of exposure in euro was actually hedged. So also those very volatile markets, what we have seen over the last 2 weeks, should not have direct impact. However, there is one kind of significant unknown. It is if, because of the limitations or counter sanctions implemented by Russian central bank, whether those hedges will be eligible and will it be able to execute them. If it is possible to execute them, then the lending companies could make the payments. So based on all of this information, so what is our current assessment as of today? So today's lending companies have very limited possibility to make actual transfers from the payments what the borrowers have made. So last week there were like 3 payments in rubles. So we are reviewing that, but the kind of possibilities are kind of becoming more limited. Together with the fact that we have discontinued new investments in loans originated by Russian lending companies, it means that there will be increase in the pending payments. This is something what our investors definitely have already experienced, at least those who have exposure to loans originated in Russia. We are in kind of close communication with all the lending companies, and there is a willingness to make the payments and settling their liabilities. And at this moment, well, the only kind of realistic way how that could be done would be on a pre-agreed schedule, because it would not be possible to settle all the amounts right away, or even transfer all the borrower repayments right away, so that like lending companies don't go out of the business. However, it is also subject to possibility to make actually this kind of physical payment, kind of to go to the bank and ask to transfer that money. So given all of this, we are still kind of exploring what are the possibilities to receive those payments, but we also need to be kind of fully in compliance with all the sanctions imposed. So that was regarding the investments itself. Since there were quite a few questions, both through Slido as well as directly what investors were asking. So there is money which is held by investors which is not invested, which is in rubles and also in Kazakhstan tenge, and I'll touch about why Kazakhstan tenge is impacted here. So how it works? So for all the currencies where we are offering investments, we need to have a possibility to hold that money actually with one of our counterparties, which in this case is we are holding all the monies that you investors hold with us with a bank. And that's something what's called kind of safeguarding account, which means that all the monies that you see on your investor statements when you log in, it's actually one-to-one backed in bank. And we are working with a number of banks that is registered in European Union. And according to our policies, we have at least two counterparties for each currency. So it means at least. So let's say for Russian ruble, we actually have three counterparties. However, what happened was that because the sanctions were implemented, and due to all those limitations, at this moment, 2 out of 3 banks with whom we held Russian ruble, they said that they are not able to kind of provide that service anymore. So because they were either kind of limiting their position or their counterparties in reverse were not providing that. Therefore, based on this kind of external factor, what we did, our counterparty exchanged all the Russian rubles to euros, and we did exactly the same to our investors proportionally. Neither our bank charged additional commission, nor we did charge any additional commission for what we would be charging for any other regular currency transfers. We had to do it also partially for Kazakhstan tenge, and why? So even though, like, for Kazakhstan there are no direct sanctions, they are not involved in the war, so we don't kind of expect anything directly kind of being impacted. The thing is that the bank with which we held Kazakhstan tenge, they hold it with other bank which was in Russia, not in Kazakhstan. So therefore, kind of not to go into situations that this money is frozen in Russia, they also kind of exchange that currency. So what is happening now? We are just kind of reviewing possibilities to kind of hold that money directly in bank in Kazakhstan. What's important to note that it doesn't have kind of any direct impact on loan performance in Kazakhstan. So it's just like about holding money. And finally, so if those were the things related to Mintos investors. So there were kind of number of questions also about how this is impacting Mintos as a company. So just the same way as our investors are not able now or have a kind of very limited ability to receive back the repayments from Russian lending companies, we also have just the same kind of limitations to receive the fee what we are charging to the lending company. So our business model is that we are charging the lending companies a fee for the monies that we kind of help them to attract through funding the loans. So it means that if our exposure to lending companies in Russia was around 15%, so it also means that our revenues would be from lending companies, which is majority of our revenues, would be dropping roughly 15%. Due to that, we would need to adjust our expenses. However, together with the cash balance what we have in our account, we feel confident that we are able to weather the storm, meaning the kind of most likely drop in the revenues. All right, so let's go now to questions and answers. So these have been the questions and answers from Slido just before the presentation started. So here are the 12 most upvoted questions. And again, these are questions that are directly related to the situation and to the war in Ukraine and sanctions for Russia. It doesn't include other questions which was related to other recoveries, where there will be a separate AMA session. So what is the situation with investments in Kazakhstan and their currency? Are there any difficulties getting money from IDF Eurasia, for example? So in terms of investments in Kazakhstan, so there hasn't been kind of any direct impact in performance of investments, meaning of the loans issued. There has been some depreciation of the currency, but kind of a smaller one, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere between like 7 to 10%. So that kind of, at least based on our review, it kind of doesn't impact any in a material event how those payments could be done. Regarding difficulties getting of money, so there, in principle, there are kind of no difficulties in making the payments. The few exceptions could be that some of the banks in Kazakhstan. So again, how the banking transfers work is that either you can kind of transfer money from one bank directly to another, or you can transfer it through intermediary banks. And there might be that for some lending companies in Kazakhstan, the intermediary bank of the bank what they use is based in Russia. So it means they would just kind of need to switch to other bank which has direct ties to Europe. I have Mintos investments in Russia, always wet purchase guarantee. Does a 60-day sales security also apply in this case? So I assume that wet purchase guarantee or 60-day sales means a 60 buyback obligation, what the lending company has issued, meaning if the borrower's loan goes into default or goes into 60 days past due, then the lending company is repurchasing that. So that guarantee is still valid. It is provided by the lending company. However, what we need to take into account is that currently the issue is not the kind of willingness or not the willingness for lending companies to make the payments, but it is a technical ability to make those payments because of the sanctioned banks and limitations in between. So the guarantees or the buyback obligation, as we call it, is still there, but it is subject for those lending companies to be able to make the transfer. In payments pending, besides Russian companies, I also see significant pending payments from IDF Eurasia, IDF Finance, and Credit Star Y. So IDF Eurasia might be related because of, as I mentioned, there might be some kind of intermediary bank of the Kazakhstan bank in between. So that would be solved by just kind of opening bank account elsewhere. For IDF Finance, which is Spain and Mexico, and Credit Star, there is no impact on the payments. So these would be kind of regular pending payments, meaning that we have a settlement once a week with all the lending companies. Once it's done, then the money is released. Russia is a big market for Mintos with a lot of loans. How much at risk are there? I hope that this part of the question, was answered during this AMA session, where we disclosed that our investors have roughly 15% of total exposure to loans in Russia, as well as what it means for Mintos as a company. On another P2P marketplace, Quico and Lime repays normally. On Mintos, nothing. Please explain this. I cannot explain how and if the kind of payments have been done on other marketplaces and what has been what is the system there. So what we know for both of those lending companies, the primary bank with whom they have been working so far was put on the sanction list. So therefore, the payments were not last week. It was not possible to obtain them. So currently, it is work in progress to open an account in a bank which is not on the sanction list. Are current investments in Belarus subject to the same level of risk or sanctions than the Ukrainian and Russian loans? Right. So, what is the situation with Republic of Belarus? Currently, we have just one lending company in Belarus, which is part of L11 Group. Belarus is also part of this war situation. So even though allegedly they say that they are not participating, there are some sanctions being imposed. It is not on the magnitude of, at least so far, what has been imposed on Russia, but there has been something imposed, and it might be that it's something more would be imposed in future. What we have done at this moment, so again, Leving is not issuing new loans at the moment in Belarus, as well as we are not kind of providing opportunities to make new investments. However, the repayments are coming through, as well as in case there would be kind of similar situation for some of the reasons that like all the banks would be sanctioned, the payments would not be able to, it would not be possible to do the payments. There is a group guarantee by Leving Group, and Belarus is just like a relatively small fraction of whole group, and it would be possible to cover all those payments based on the schedule when the borrowers pay from the group. So therefore, we kind of don't see any impact from Belarus directly, except that the outstanding investments in loans originated in Belarus will decrease. So in view of the existing war with Russia and Ukraine, how will you process the loans and recovery from Finco entity, namely Dinero? How more time recovery? So this is Finco is like one of the two lending companies in Ukraine with whom we used to work, but who defaulted. Currently, the remaining amount in recovery, which is roughly 8 million euros, most of that recovery is expected to be received from cash flows that will be coming outside of Ukraine or Russia. So it's from kind of restructuring what we have secured. So therefore, in terms of both kind of total recovery and timeline of recovery, we don't see currently any changes from the existing plan. Why is Mintos so slow to react to world events, especially with conservative investing strategy? Will there be an option to edit, exclude countries? So apart from the kind of blog post where we are posting information on daily basis about what is happening in Ukraine and Russia, we were also sending out information both to kind of investors as well as posting it in communities. There's a question asked before at the moment when it was called still kind of tension between Ukraine and Russia, not the war. So I think as many people, definitely I was, and I know many people were hoping for that situation to resolve peacefully. Unfortunately, it hasn't. But I think we reacted very fast once there were kind of more indications of kind of very high scale escalation. In terms of why the kind of particular loans were included in conservative investing strategy. So all the three strategies, what we redefined strategies or Mintos strategies, which are out there, they are algorithmic based, and it is very precisely defined what are the algorithms based on which the investments are done there. So for some, it is, let's say, for high yield, it is based on just like highest interest rate. For conservative, it is based on certain risk score. Does it have a buyback obligation, and so on. So what we did, and what we're kind of also going to do in the future, the Mintos predefined strategies will be algorithmically based. However, we also actually did, even before the invasion, although it was just like a few days before that, we excluded lending companies from Russia, being able to put the loans in conservative strategy more with reasoning that it was likely that the risk score might change, and therefore we kind of excluded it proactively. Pending payments are piling up for some lending companies, but Mintos failed to provide the pending payments update due on March 4th. What is going on? This was not directly related to Russian and Ukrainian war. This is more kind of a technical thing, and I'm not sure, but it should be kind of posted either kind of now or very soon. So the pending payment report is something that we do on a weekly basis. This was more an operational issue of that it was not uploaded last Friday. Right, and then the last three questions for this summer. I would like to know if the redemption guarantee are still in effect. Is the conversion of Russian ruble into another currency done as normal? Redemption guarantee, I believe it is meant the buyback obligation, meaning when the loan is 60 days past due, that it will be bought back by lending company. Yes, the redemption guarantee is still in effect, but what is currently is a major issue is not the lending companies kind of unwillingness to issue kind of honor any guarantees. They want to kind of honor them. The key issue is about being able to physically transfer those payments. And for Russian ruble, so at the moment, most of the Russian ruble currency balances has been automatically exchanged to euro due to the fact that our counterparties did that, and the remaining part, which is just like some less than 20% of the initial one, is stays in Russian ruble, because also our counterparty currently is not able to exchange that to any other currency. Why I do not get my withdrawals? None of them. I have been waiting for more than a week. Is that somehow war related, or what is your problem? So with withdrawals, there hasn't been kind of any issue. So we are performing all the requested withdrawals within the set timeline. Even though we are saying it's done with 2 days, usually it's done within 1 day or several times a day. So in case you haven't kind of received some of the payment, please contact directly our investor support, and they will kind of investigate with our banks why there might be some kind of delays. But overall, we haven't seen kind of any delays from our side. Are pending payments in Russia, COO, and other companies be frozen if crisis holds on, and do we get it latest after the crisis ends, or do you think that money is lost? So currently, the payments will definitely be limited, at least because there are the sanctions, and there are kind of new sanctions being implemented. As we mentioned, we are looking ways how to do it sanction compliant to recover those amounts, recover the payments. Do we think the money is lost? Well, we don't think that the money is lost. Well, the situation should be resolved at some moment. Well, first of all, due to humanitarian reasons, we hope that there will be peace resolved soon. And after that, there should also be at some moment resolved the situation how the debtors and creditors could be settled. However, what needs to be taken into account, what is very uncertain at this moment, is the currency exchange rate. And if it fluctuates further or depreciates further, it might mean some partial loss for the investments made. So that would be all today in terms of questions and answers. I understand that like much of the information might be very technical, but we wanted to be very frank and very transparent with you and give you all the details what we have, and we will continue to do that and update that in our blog post. We are doing as kind of much as possible in this situation, but we also need to be aware that this kind of doesn't impact only Mintos and Mintos investors, but it basically impacts all the financial entities and everybody dealing with Russia and Ukraine. And as the last thing, but definitely not the least, we believe that it's a great tragedy what is happening with the war in Ukraine and Russian invasions there. So what we ask is for all the people to support people in Ukraine, and please do it in whatever way you can, be it through the local charities, through your work, through spreading the message, as well as it is possible to do that through Mintos. So we have a dedicated way how you can also donate, and all that money would be put to charity. We launched that late last Friday, and yeah, I would welcome everybody to make a donation, whatever is possible. All right, so thank you very much for your time, and if you have any other questions, definitely reach out to our support and follow our blog post, and we will keep you posted and on what's happening. And I can reassure, we are doing everything that is in our best interest of our investors. And as you could see, also kind of our interests very much are aligned, because investments that you make are very much correlated also to the revenues that we make. Right. Thank you, and take care.